Greetings, X, Twitter. I wanted to go live this morning because I wanted to talk about something. As y'all probably well know, yesterday the Homeland Security Committee voted, well, I want to say last night, it was early this morning, they voted to forward the impeachment articles to the full House for a vote. Particularly, they voted to in fact impeach Alejandr Majorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. I happened to be able to watch a good portion of that hearing. I just wanted to see exactly what we were dealing with. And give me a second here. Okay, what we were dealing with, and the hearing went just as kind of what I thought it was going to go, which was that they were going to be adamant in wanting to impeach Alejandro Majorkas. Now, this is the scenario that I saw, and I'm going to give kind of my little opinion of this. I posted earlier this morning on my thoughts, and I kind of, in doing that, I thought maybe I should go live and talk about it just a little bit, just to further clarify, I guess, my point of view. The meeting, or the hearing itself yesterday lasted amazingly historic, I would say historic, 16 hours, because it started, I think, at 9 in the morning, and they finished right around 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, with the final vote. It was a very ardent and very stringent hearing, in the sense that Republicans did not budge on anything with their colleagues across the aisle. This hearing allowed me to really see exactly, to what degree the division in our legislative body is actually at. And sad to say, it is advanced to a point that I don't see any way that our legislative body going forward could actually recover or be restored in that sense. And the reason I say it is because of how adamant the conservatives were with a lot of the stuff that toward the end of the hearing that their colleagues across the aisle were requesting, because it got to a point where even the Democrats were like, okay, this impeachment's going forward. They're going to, based on the numbers, the vote's going to end up forwarding the articles. Forwarding the articles to the full House for a vote. They said, we're not going to be able to stop it. So their tactic, or not, I want to say tactic, but their objective upon that realization was that they were going to try to provide or supply as much information within the articles of impeachment for the Senate to make a fair and just and sound decision as to whether or not they were going to actually do the impeachment, or for that same matter, that you supply that full information to the full House for a full House vote. Republicans in that committee didn't want anything to do with that. Every freaking concession that the Democrats were offering, they weren't even disputing whether the vote was going to take place or whether the vote was going to, they weren't even trying to fight and change the vote. They were trying to say, okay, if we're going to do this, let's provide as much ample and transparent information as possible. And even those concessions, the Republicans didn't want anything to do with it. And they got to the point where at the end they decided, okay, we're going to vote to block any more amendments, because it was late at night. So they got fed up that they ended up blocking Democrats from adding more concessions. This goes to show that these particular conservatives are hell bent on an agenda rather than than doing, looking at approaching this thing in a, fair and just manner. Now, another thing that made this hearing that much more concerning is something that they did that I believe, in one manner or another, will set a major precedent for this nation. One of the topics that was discussed at great length in the hearing yesterday was the subject of prosecutorial discretion. Prosecutorial discretion is kind of a manner of using a certain degree of flexibility in whether you want to prosecute somebody or not. This topic came up originally in the court case of United States versus Texas, with respect that was filed against Majorkas, obligating him to make the arrest. This happened a year or so ago, and the Supreme Court ruled that Homeland Security had awarded, or that Homeland Security had the ability to use prosecutorial, to a limited degree, prosecutorial discretion in applying their immigration policies. Now, by voting to impeach Majorkas, this is the thing, and this is where it gets concerning. Prosecutorial discretion is a long-standing doctrine used mostly by law enforcement to determine whether or not, number one, to arrest an individual, to give him a warning, maybe even arrest them on a much lesser charge, depending upon the situation. Prosecutorial discretion is not only used by law enforcement to a certain degree, but by prosecutors, by the courts, because obviously, and this is the example that I used in a post that I put out this morning, is that, for example, you're driving your car, and let's say you get pulled over for a traffic violation. The officer can use prosecutorial discretion to say, okay, I'm going to give you a warning this time, but you got to make sure that you abide by the law. That's an example of prosecutory discretion. Or if, and this is another example, let's say there's an extenuating emergency. An example that it requires the officer to come, and if he sees that what this person is doing, he's doing it as a result of an emergency, and he could say, this, given that this is an emergency, I'm going to discreetly give you a warning. I'm gonna help you as best I can. Well, without that prosecutorial discretion, they have to prosecute you. They have to arrest you. They have to ticket you. They have to, there's no leniency involved. And with the courts, it's the same thing, because you go before a judge and you plead your case. You may say, Your Honor, this is my first time doing this. I was unaware of this law or whatever. The judge could use prosecutorial discretion and say, okay, this is your first offense. Maybe you didn't know. We're gonna let you off with a warning. We're gonna dismiss the charges, and so forth. But without that prosecutorial discretion, the judge can't even do that. So basically, what this committee is saying by voting to impeach Majorkas is that the doctrine of prosecutorial discretion is illegal and is invalid. Because the main argument that was being made by their colleagues on the other side is, okay, Majorkas was using prosecutorial discretion because of the fact that, and this was also pointed out adamantly, repeatedly, that there is a max of 34,000 capacity for detaining, but on the average they were having 37,000 encounters, or detaining 37,000 a day minimum. So he was having to use prosecutorial discretion, to say, okay, I need to detain these, but in order to detain these, I need to release those because there's no space. He's using some sort of discretion. Okay, what the committee, the Homeland Security Committee is saying is that he cannot use prosecutorial discretion. That prosecutorial discretion is not an option. It's not legal. Basically, that's what they're saying in a nutshell. I mean, there's no way around them to deny that they're saying, okay, this is not a legal argument or legal doctrine. And you can say hello to my little kitty Tiger. He's here today. So basically, what they're saying is that prosecutorial discretion is invalid. Now, in the process of saying that, they're actually thumbing the nose at the U.S. Supreme Court, because the U.S. Supreme Court, in their ruling in that particular case, said, okay, the federal government has the availability to use prosecutorial discretion. And the committee is saying here, no, that's not the case. So they're basically overturning a Supreme Court ruling. Do they have the authority? And I think this is the question that as Americans, and we need to ask our elected officials, do you have the authority to overturn the Supreme Court? That's the other concerning thing, because then that means that you're saying, okay, this legislative or this branch of the government has more power than the other branch. And by the feeling and the establishment of our founding fathers, all three branches were created to be equal and be checks and balances against each other. So if that is the case, then the legislative branch cannot, by any way, shape, or form, overturn or overrule the judicial branch. This is going to be a fun live stream, people, okay? I don't know if I can be able to edit that out. Sorry, Michibu, Tiger. So, basically, these are the two concerning issues that came about in this hearing yesterday. Is the fact of, number one, can the committee, or can the legislative branch overpower, overturn, overrule, reverse what the Supreme Court has established? This is going to be one of the main issues that is going to have to be dealt, number one, during the full House vote. Number two, if it goes to the Senate's got to look at this and say, okay, is this a valid argument? Can we conduct an impeachment on this individual when the articles charge that he's using a long-standing doctrine that this committee has said is not legal, is not valid? That's why a lot of people are saying that this is not going to make it past the Senate, because the Senate's probably not going to want to try him based on that logic. Okay, and based on the logic that, okay, can this committee overturn or overrule a Supreme Court ruling? It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. In that sense, but it is concerning that by the committee impeaching him or voting to impeach him, it is concerning the precedent that they're setting, because they're setting a precedent that prosecutorial discretion is not legal, is not valid. And I don't think that's the message that this committee should be conveying. They cannot convey a message that violates a ruling of a higher court, nor can they overrule or overpower another branch of the government. I don't see how or why. It violates constitutional principles, very strong constitutional principles. I could say more about this hearing, but I don't want to go beyond that, because my objective originally, when I set out to do this live stream, I was going to talk about that. I was going to basically slam the Republicans for their attitude, because if you look at the hearing toward the end, both parties were getting frustrated, but the ones that were getting more frustrated were the conservatives. And I mean, I don't, and that did not, to me, that kind of proved everything that I was thinking with respect to the, how agenda driven these parties are. But I did not want to go that far, because I think what's more concerning here is the fact that there's a precedent to be set here, or there's a possible precedent to be set here, in the fact that is this committee is Congress able to circumvent? Are they able to overturn a ruling of interpretation by the Supreme Court? Do they have the right to do that? That's the question. I don't think they do, and I would love to hear from you guys to see what you think on this, because this is something that it came out, it very much came out at me, and it made me think, what is the scope of authority of this committee? What is the scope of authority of the legislative branch versus the judicial branch? I mean, you hear about the Supreme Court issuing rulings, and the states or individuals having to abide by the ruling because it is the law of the land. But does the law of the land, the supreme law of the land, does it have standing against another branch of the government? Does this committee, do these political parties have that authority to say the Supreme Court is wrong, what the Supreme Court is ruling is invalid? We know better. That's something that we as Americans need to think about, because if these elected officials are of that belief, then we as Americans, we need to be, I guess you can call it, the oversight at a national level of our government. And if what they're doing is wrong legally, then we as American citizens have the responsibility to set them right. Whether that means we vote them the hell out of office, whether that means that we voice our concerns in mass and magnitude to our elected officials, but we have to call them into accountability. That's the thing. And as Americans, I think, when we look at our elected officials, we need to look at them not through the same political lens that they're using, but we need to look at them outside the box, at their behavior, at their attitude, whether or not what they're doing violates law, whether it's morally or ethically correct. And I think as Americans, we fail to do that. We fail to use that unfiltered lens, that impartial, nonpartisan lens, to look at and see these elected officials and see, what in reality they're doing. I think as Americans, we have to hold them accountable in that aspect, and we're not doing that. If we're looking at them through the same political lens that they're promoting, we're no better than them. In all honesty, we're no better than them. If we're looking at them with a Democratic lens, we're no better than the Democrats. If we look at them from a conservative lens, we're no better than the conservatives. We have to look at them in an impartial manner and hold them accountable on moral, ethic, and legal standards. It's the only appropriate way to do this. And we're in an election year right now. And the fact that we're in an election year right now, this is the time when we need to hold them into accountability. That's the bottom line. We need to hold them into an accountability. The time is now. Well, I think that that's what I wanted to cover, and I think that going forward we need to keep an eye on our government, and I'm going to wait and see how this House vote turns out, and maybe depending on how it goes, I may do a live stream on that when the time comes. But I wanted to come across with this specific point that I found so what's the word I'm looking for? It just stuck out at me. Of anything and everything that was in that hearing, this was the one thing that stuck out in front of me, and that was prosecutorial discretion. And I think that what I've said is very valid, and it is something that as Americans we need to think about, but at the same time, our elected officials need to think about it, because I think that they blinded themselves to something very obvious that they did not think about. That's my point of view. Well, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for your time, and I may go live later. I may go live tomorrow, but this was my thought for the day.